Okay, so we left off talking about the Übermensch as a value creator, or a value positor, a conscious liar, if you will, and one who is revenge-free, someone free from resentment and the denial of life, and one who affirms life. And the question is, how do you do this? Well, Nietzsche thinks that you do this via a doctrine he calls eternal recurrence, or the eternal return of the same. And this is, in fact, what Zarathustra teaches, the eternal recurrence. So Nietzsche says, for a minute, let's imagine that the eternal recurrence is both a metaphysical point he's making, but it's also a psychological exercise. So let's focus on the psychological exercise first. Nietzsche says, imagine that life that you live right now is going to repeat over and over and over again. Imagine time is this flat circle that just repeats endlessly over and over again. Would you be able to, knowing that, how would you respond to that? Would you be able to say, yes, I can't wait to live everything I've lived before and everything I'm going to live over and over again? That means you have no regrets. You want to, in fact, live your life, at least as far as you know it, over and over again. Very few people, Nietzsche thinks, could look back at their lives and say, wow, everything that happened in my life, I want again and again and again. Fill it up again, ad infinitum. Do you find this idea despairing, or do you find it freeing and liberating? And Nietzsche thinks when, and only when, you find that idea of living your life as you know it, all the mistakes, all the pain, all the suffering, all the joys, all the sorrows, everything, over and over again, then and only then do you become the Übermensch, someone free from revenge, because you become unhinged, so to speak, from the resentment you have toward your past. Remember, we talked about revenge and resentment as the will's ill will toward time. The only thing that can free you from that is the absolute embrace of time itself as endless, of your life and its suffering as endless. So the eternal return is this imaginative exercise, this psychological exercise that allows us to affirm life unconditionally. Okay? Nietzsche also has a metaphysical point about the eternal return. I think Nietzsche really thinks, and sometimes he talks about this, that this is in fact what is going to happen, that the universe is made up of a finite number of things, and if you have a finite number of things, given an infinite number of time, all possibilities will repeat themselves over and over again. So you've heard the joke about put an ape in front of a typewriter, given an infinite time and an infinite amount of ink and paper, they would type Shakespeare. And not only would they type Shakespeare, but an infinite amount of time, they'd type Shakespeare an infinite amount of times. So Nietzsche is saying that eventually, if the universe is constituted in the way he thinks it is, namely finite number of stuff, things, and infinite time, reality will play itself out over and over again. And we need to be honest with ourselves. So if there is any truth, it's the idea that life is on repeat over and over again. That will to power, and this is a deeper metaphysical point of Nietzsche's idea of the eternal return. Nietzsche seems to think that, he says this in his will to power text, that the world is will to power and nothing besides. That if you were to break down reality, it is nothing but will to power. There is no being in reality. Remember, it's just chaos, but that chaos has a kind of, doesn't have an order to it. That's why I could say it has an order, but it's not really an order. What reality is, if you were to say what reality is or what becoming is, it's nothing but life and will to power surging on endlessly toward overcoming itself. It's going toward nothing. All will to power is life wanting to keep living. It's life creating obstacles to overcome them over and over and over again. So Nietzsche thinks that reality itself, which is becoming, which is change, which is flux, is also will to power. And you can understand Nietzsche's philosophy, and a very helpful way to understand it is through the lens of a philosopher I've mentioned before named Martin Heidegger, 20th century German philosopher, who says Nietzsche's philosophy is essentially the idea that reality is will to power, which eternally recurs. And that means, and this is getting into a little bit more of the, kind of wacky metaphysics of it all, and maybe not appropriate for an ethics course, but it's interesting to mention anyway, that Nietzsche thinks, and the reason it's interesting to mention is because Nietzsche's come up with, I think, an ingenious way to have reality without, and have a kind of, semblance of order to reality without recourse to a god. Because Nietzsche was very, very worried, and he was very clever. He knew that if you allowed intelligibility or order in the back door, so to speak, in reality, if you allowed reality to be meaningful or intelligible in any way, then you were asking for theism again. You were asking for a God. And Nietzsche, remember, is an atheist by instinct. He doesn't want that. So he comes up with this really ingenious metaphysics that isn't a metaphysics. It's the absolute denial of metaphysics as metaphysics, as going beyond the physical. It's an ingenious account for reality, or you could say it's a lie, because remember, everything is a lie. It's an artistic expression of what reality is. But sometimes Nietzsche talks as if this is the case. That reality is constituted by will to power, eternally recurring over and over again, will to power which constantly is moving through sundry stages of itself, that is constantly ossifying reality and then shattering it, that is freezing reality and breaking it so as to feel the surge of life over and over again. Just think of the way in which the human being, according to Nietzsche and the Übermensch, posits values so as to smash them and feel alive. Well, reality is doing this. It's gathering itself together, pausing, and then breaking itself apart again. It's chaos and order, destroying itself over and over again to surge on toward higher levels and various stages of life. And that process itself, which goes on ad infinitum, namely will to power, challenging itself, if you will, eternally, and eternally doing the same thing over and over again, that process itself is the eternal return. So for Nietzsche, will to power, which is constantly becoming toward no end other than just challenging itself, eternally recurs. So one can say then, with Nietzsche, that reality is simply will to power eternally recurring over and over again.